Welcome to Fine Line Station, where I read out letters and emails sent by you, the listeners. They are real-life stories about the uncanny, the creepy, and the unknown. I am your host, Charlie Fox, and I hope you're ready to tune in. This evening we have a lovely email sent in by Kevin, who wants to share a story about their childhood friend Billy. They make some very interesting points about ADHD and video games and talk about how media can be such a great way to connect with others. I must agree with him there. It's amazing how different shows or games or podcasts can bring people together. First because of a shared interest and then into a deeper friendship. So with that, let's take a wander through Kevin's story. Hi Charlie. Starting with the first thing I want to share, I love playing video games. I grew up when games were readily available on pretty much any device, so I always had lots of options. That being said, my parents had mixed feelings about games. They wanted me to be happy, so I often got new consoles for my birthday, but I always had a screen time limit. Honestly, I didn't really question it much because I assumed most people also had limits, but when I was about 8 and started hanging out at friends' places more often, I realised probably only half the other kids shared those rules with me. I remember trying to bargain with my parents for more time. The only compromise that worked, though looking back now I think I had the short end of the stick, was if I did all of my chores before Friday, I would get an extra hour on the weekend. We had several fights where I would complain that my friends had much longer times than me and I was missing out on all the online fun they were having, but my parents remained firm. Eventually I did discover a bit of a loophole. If I went to a friend's house and we played video games, it was pretty easy to fib to my parents and say we only played a little bit instead of the whole afternoon. This seemed to work most of the time. Sometimes my friends' parents would notice us not having moved an inch while playing on the PlayStation for hours, but as long as we had small breaks every now and then, it was fine. It might seem a bit silly to go to this much effort to play video games, but there was just something about them. I used to find this a sore point to talk about, but now that I'm nearing the end of high school and having to think about my future, I can freely admit that I am the kid that always gets distracted. In early primary school, I was the one who would get sidetracked by a different task than the teachers wanted, the one who would zone out during assemblies, who would always fidget with whatever I could get my hands on. My teachers would always share the same stuff during parent-teacher interviews. Kevin is a good kid and kind to his classmates, but he has trouble focusing. Obviously, looking back now, I can see ADHD written all over my actions, but it did take a while for my parents and I to reach that conclusion. Throw in a few more arguments and me not being able to explain properly why I couldn't focus until we finally got some professional help. You know when you've had all these thoughts and feelings tumbling around in your head for such a long time and you've never been able to properly express it? And then suddenly someone says exactly what you're feeling. That relief when my parents finally nodded with understanding to the psychologist explaining things I couldn't was honestly life-changing. We put a bunch of habits and tools in place for me, and they seem to help a lot. I guess we're lucky I was diagnosed early on because I found it relatively easy to implement a lot of it into my daily life. I still had hard moments, and it wasn't like I was suddenly cured or anything, but it helped enough to improve my attention and schoolwork. Where do video games come into this? Well, I struggled a bit with hobbies sometimes. I loved watching movies but often got distracted halfway through, or I was asking too many questions and fidgeting too much to make it enjoyable for others. I didn't really like reading either. I honestly think it's a little boring and I found myself reading without even comprehending what was happening in the story. But games were one of the few things that held my full attention. I actually did a small project on it a year or two back in one of my high school classes. It's something to do with the fast-paced nature of many games, making them visually and audibly stimulating. The quick changing settings and the requirements of you moving the controller reacting to the environment. There is also the instant gratification from rewards and completing a quest or a level. My brain would eat it all up. I know all of this isn't always a good thing. I did read a few studies for the report that people with ADHD could develop an addiction to gaming because of all that. But like a lot of things, as long as it's in moderation, it can be a positive experience. It's hard to admit, but having strict screen limits from the start was probably really beneficial for me. I could still enjoy myself, but it never got out of hand. Do you play many games, Charlie? I once tried to explain to Mum about how much I love them, but she just nodded along like mums sometimes do. My dad played super old style games when he was younger, but doesn't really care for them now. I mean, they think it's cool how far technology has come and how great the graphics and whatnot are now. But sometimes I want to tell them that these games I play are like art. They are just as impressive as those galleries they visit with the famous artworks up for display. I have played my fair share of online games, whatever was popular at the time so I could play with friends, but my favourites were always the random indie games that would pop up on my feed. I would usually use most of my pocket money on whatever was on sale on Steam or the Nintendo PlayStation Store. There was something charming about simpler games, and quite often they had more intense story beats that really stuck with me. I really fell in love with these types of games when I started hanging out with my friend Billy. Billy was in the grade below me in primary school, but we shared a school year in one of the mixed classes. But I overheard a conversation with him about a game he was playing and became curious. We became fast friends after sharing suggestions to each other and started hanging out after school. Billy was an amazing person, but he had some pretty tough stuff to deal with as well. He had something called muscular dystrophy, which made his body super weak. I don't really want to get into it more, but even in the few years I knew him, I could see how much it affected him physically. Anyway, he loved video games as much as me. He was a super smart kid, and I was in awe at how he was able to stay so focused on one thing at a time. Sometimes normal kids found it tricky to get along with me, but he had so much patience for me and never got angry when I interrupted him or accidentally bumped his stuff over while waving my arms around. He loved games for similar reasons as me, but he also had his own reasons. Late one evening, we were playing Zelda on his Switch under the blankets, and he told me he loved being able to run around as Link, to tumble and climb and jump, to go on an adventure and see and hear the grass blow in the wind, to watch the clouds cast shadows over Hyrule, and to be the one to save the land. He would never be able to do any of that in his life, so this was his way of doing it all. It really hit me then how lucky I was that I could run around outside and play soccer whenever I wanted. I could go out on spontaneous trips to the beach with my parents. I could easily visit any of my friends' houses because I didn't have any special needs. Billy struggled with even walking on some days, and a simple cold could knock him out for a month. Despite all of that, he was one of the happiest people I had ever met. He had a wicked sense of humour and always a big grin to go with it. We made countless inside jokes together and came up with all sorts of our own stories and adventures. He always accepted me for who I was, and I made sure to always do the same. I remember wiping my tears away that night and hugging Billy close, telling him he was the bestest friend I ever had, and I would always go on adventures with him in Hyrule. He passed away when I was 13. It happened a month or two before I graduated primary school. It felt wrong that I couldn't spot his face in the crowd cheering for me. Everyone who knew Billy was devastated. It took a while before I touched games again. My ADHD symptoms got much worse, and it took a lot of time and effort from multiple people to get me back on track, especially when starting high school. Eventually, though, I got back into the swing of life. I played a few online games with new friends I made, and my grades slowly started going up as I tried a bunch of new techniques to stay better focused and to remember homework. It wasn't until halfway through the year that I finally checked my Steam notifications, and I saw Billy had gifted me a game 9 months ago. It was a multiplayer game, but in the unusual sense. You didn't get to pick who you ended up with, but instead you were randomly put together with someone else on an island where you had to work together to build up a shelter, find resources, and discover the island's magic. While it was a simple game in most senses, the graphics were whimsically cartoonish and colourful with accompanying soft music and ambience. The communication system was also simple in some ways, but also more complex than what I'd seen before in games like this. You couldn't specifically type anything, just use set phrases you could search up and send, but the options for different character expressions, movements, and noises were above anything I'd played. Kind of like emojis when texting someone, but way more lifelike with so many ways to express yourself. I fell into the game and found it comforting in its gameplay, but also in the fact it felt like Billy had been over just last week, recommending a random game he had found. This bit can sound a bit silly, but it feels true to me. I told my mum once, but I think she just thought it was a way I was dealing with my grief. Sometimes when I played that island game, it felt like I was getting paired up with Billy. I've already said how vague the communication style is, but I swear any inside jokes we had or references to other games or movies we both liked, the other playable character would share them with me. There was one time I was playing at Billy's house over the weekend and the weather was just perfect and calm enough that Billy and I sat outside on his porch. We were both a little sugar crazy, so I was running around outside finding sticks and offering them up as magical swords to Billy, who was my king. It was a really silly game, but one we both found hilariously fun and would often reference back to it. A few weeks into playing that game, I was paired with someone who helped me collect sticks for our shelter, but then his character went away for a moment. He came back into my view about 10 minutes later wearing a crown and his avatar laughing and requesting more swords with an emoji. In that moment, all I could think about was Billy. I know it would be impossible for that person on the other end to actually be Billy, but it's also impossible for this random somebody on the internet to know so much about me and the friendship I had with Billy. You were always randomly paired when playing this game. It's pretty popular now and has thousands and thousands of players on it at once. Yet at least half the time I am put with this person. I mean, I guess I can't be sure because there isn't any usernames or way to know each other after the game has ended. But they always have the same avatar, greet me in the same way and share those various fond memories and jokes every time. My screen time has been super strict lately now that I have to prepare for my end of term exams, so I've started using podcasts or random radio stations to help me concentrate. That's how I came across your show and thought you'd like to hear my story. I still don't know what is going on, but in my free time I still visit the island and I'm often paired with the same person. I don't really mind not knowing though. I'm just happy it feels like I can visit my friend again and share our memories once more. Thank you, Kevin. And that brings us to the end of today's story. Thank you for sharing your story, Kevin, and I'm very sorry for your loss. Life can be so hard for some people with unexpected challenges, but seeing their smiles in the face of difficulty is encouraging, isn't it? I also don't know what is going on in your game, but maybe Billy's love for you and your shared interest was so strong, it couldn't help but carry over to us, just a little bit. This has been another broadcast by Fine Line Station. I'm Charlie Fox, and I'll speak to you next time.